Today, um, we're looking into this kind of unnerving situation brewing in China,
Yeah.
a surge in serious, like respiratory illnesses has everyone on edge. It seems like hospitals are overflowing,
Right.
and there's this, well, almost a sense of panic, you know?
Definitely some echoes of the early COVID days.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's what makes this so, I don't know, fascinating, I guess.
Yeah.
We've got 3 articles here, all pretty recent, one from Daily Mail, one from Newsweek, and then one from The Mirror.
Okay.
Each one tackles the situation a little differently, which makes you wonder, is there more to the story than we're seeing?
Absolutely. The situation is so fluid right now. It's changing by the day.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, the whole COVID-19 flashback thing is definitely adding to the anxiety.
Totally. And just reading these articles, I mean, wow, the imagery is intense.
Yeah.
Packed hospitals,
Yeah.
lines and lines of parents with sick kids, even funeral homes are struggling to keep up. It's pretty grim.
It's a stark picture for sure. But, and I think this is really important, we need to be mindful that a lot of this is based on like social media posts and, personal accounts.
Right.
Those can be really powerful, firsthand experiences,
Yeah.
but they don't always show the whole picture.
So like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Exactly. We don't want to jump to conclusions based on incomplete information.
Makes sense.
Well,
But still, even if some of it's exaggerated, the sheer volume of reports is unsettling, wouldn't you say? It's like a wave of worry spreading online.
for sure. It really shows the power of social media in a crisis. It can be amazing for raising awareness, but it can also, quickly amplify misinformation.
Right, right. So let's dig into the illness itself. Initially, everyone was buzzing about HMPV or human metapneumovirus.
Right.
It's kind of scary, huh?
It does sound a bit intimidating, doesn't it?
Yeah.
But it's actually pretty common. It's a respiratory virus, usually causes like mild cold symptoms.
Yeah, like a sniffle here and there. So the question is, why is everyone freaking out about it now? What's changed?
Well, it's important to remember HMPV is just one possibility. It hasn't actually been confirmed as the main culprit.
Right.
The Chinese CDC is actually pointing to influenza
Oh.
as the leading cause. They're seeing much higher positive test rates for flu.
So it's flu season,
Exactly.
and it just happens to be, what, a particularly bad one?
It's flu season, and, we often see multiple viruses circulating at the same time. It can be tricky to pinpoint just one.
Okay, that makes sense. But then, why is this flu season hitting so hard? I mean, we've had the flu before, right? What's different this time?
Well, this is where it gets interesting. This situation has some similarities to the white lung outbreak they had in China last winter. Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Caused by Mycoplasma pneumonia, another respiratory virus, usually mild, but in that outbreak, a lot of people got really sick.
Right, and wasn't that linked to, like, weakened immunity because of all the lockdowns and school closures during the pandemic? Could that be happening again?
It's a very real possibility. If people were isolated for a long time and didn't get exposed to as many germs, their immune systems might not be as strong.
So, like, our bodies haven't had enough practice fighting off bugs.
Yeah, kind of like that. And it brings up this bigger question about, the long-term effects of those pandemic policies. Are we seeing the consequences now?
That's a good point. And then there's this other, I don't know, I guess unsettling thing. The lack of official information coming out of China,
Yeah.
like crickets from the government and the WHO,
Yeah.
almost scarier than the reports themselves, wouldn't you say?
It definitely adds to the unease, It's a bit of a black box.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, why are they being so quiet? Are they still figuring things out, trying to avoid panic? Or maybe even trying to control the narrative?
Well, governments always face this tricky balance. They have to be transparent, but they also don't want to create mass hysteria.
Right, right. It's a tough spot. But this lack of, I guess, transparency, it just creates this void where rumors and mistrust can fester.
Oh, absolutely. It's like a breeding ground for misinformation. So it's really important to be careful about where you're getting your information from. Don't just rely on social media. Stick to reliable sources like the WHO or, those reputable scientific journals.
Okay, good advice. Now, these articles we're looking at, they also share some personal stories, which I think really humanize the situation.
Yeah, it's good to remember that behind all the statistics, there are real people dealing with this.
Like there's this farmer, Mr. Peng. He saw several deaths in his community. Can you imagine the fear?
Oh, absolutely.
And then there's Miss Wang. She's a funeral director, and she's totally swamped with the surge in demand. It's just heartbreaking.
It really drives home the point that even if this isn't as bad as some fear, it's still having a massive impact on people's lives.
Right, right. And then there's the story of a Chinese video blogger who got sick after traveling to Guangzhou. He said it felt just like when he had COVID.
Hmm.
It really highlights how similar so many of these respiratory illnesses can feel.
That's a really important point. It's so easy to misdiagnose yourself based on just how you feel.
Yeah.
Testing is crucial to know exactly what you're dealing with and get the right treatment.
So to sum it up, we have a rapidly evolving situation in China, a wave of illness with the potential to be really serious,
Right.
and a lack of clear information that's just fueling all sorts of speculation and worry. What are your initial thoughts on all this?
It's definitely a complicated picture, and I think this idea of weakened immunity from the pandemic policies, that's something we really need to pay attention to. This could have much broader implications than just this one outbreak.
And then you have social media, where information, whether accurate or not, spreads like wildfire. It really shows how interconnected the world is, how quickly something local can become a global issue.
Absolutely. It raises a crucial question for everyone listening. What if this turns out to be much worse than we initially thought? What does that mean for the world? How would different countries react? And what can we learn from COVID-19 and apply to this situation?
Those are all big questions and definitely something to think about as we continue to learn more about this unfolding situation.
You know, it's kind of strange, right? All these reports out of China, but we're not seeing a huge reaction from, like, the WHO or anything.
Yeah, that's true. No travel bans, no emergency meetings, nothing like the whole COVID frenzy
Right.
makes you think, are they just downplaying it? Or are they, playing it safe and waiting for more data? What's your take on all the quiet?
Probably a bit of both, I'd say. I mean, you got to remember, the WHO has been, well, criticized a lot, right? For overreacting sometimes, underreacting other times. They're
Yeah,
walking a tightrope. Public health on one side, and then you've got all the economic and political stuff on the other.
yeah, for sure. It's a tough balancing act.
Yeah.
But even if they're quiet, I mean, we shouldn't just ignore it, right? Even if this turns out to be a bad flu season, it's a wake-up call. Like,
Yeah.
we're still vulnerable to these things.
Oh, absolutely. This whole thing, no matter how it plays out, it's like, hello, we need strong public health systems, global cooperation, and got to keep researching these new diseases, you know?
No resting on our laurels, for sure.
Mm.
And speaking of, well, learning from the past, this brings us back to those pandemic impacts, the long-term ones.
No way.
We shut down the world for months, economies went haywire, and life just changed, didn't it? Gotta wonder, what's the lasting damage?
Yeah, we're just starting to scratch the surface of what all that did to us, both individually and as a society.
One thing that's really got me thinking is this immunity debt idea.
Yeah.
We talked about it a bit earlier, right? Less exposure to germs during lockdowns might have actually weakened our immune systems.
Yeah.
Like we traded one problem for another.
It's a big debate in the scientific world right now. More and more evidence is suggesting that, yeah, less exposure, especially when you're a kid, can mess with how your immune system develops. Think of it this way. Your immune system is kind of like a muscle. It needs to be worked out. If it's not fighting off enough stuff, it might not develop all the tools it needs to do its job.
Oh, so all that lockdown stuff kept our immune systems kind of out of shape.
Well, it's a way to think about it. But got to be careful here. Immunity is super complex. It's not just about exposure. Genetics play a role, your overall health, what you eat, stress, all that stuff matters too.
Okay, so it's not like a direct cause and effect thing. Lockdowns equals weak immune system.
Right. But even if there is some truth to this immunity debt thing, how worried should we be? Will our bodies bounce back now that things are, more normal?
That's the big question, isn't it?
Some experts think, yeah, we'll be fine. We're out in the world again, exposed to more stuff. Our immune systems will catch up.
Makes sense.
Others are more, I guess, cautious. They think we might see a spike in certain infections, especially in kids, because they missed out on all that exposure.
Yeah. I mean, this is uncharted territory, isn't it? Never had a pandemic like this before, so we're figuring it out as we go. Kind of like a giant global experiment.
That's a good way to put it. Exciting times for immunology, but also a bit, nerve-wracking.
You said it. Now, I was reading this other study, and it actually suggested lockdowns might have had a good effect on our gut microbiomes.
Oh, that's interesting. How so?
Well, it seems like less antibiotics, less processed food during lockdowns, maybe more time outdoors, less stress, all that created a better environment for like a healthy, diverse gut microbiome.
That's a really cool idea. The gut microbiome is so important. It affects everything, including your immune system.
Right.
It totally makes sense that changes to our lifestyle, diet, all that could have affected it.
But wouldn't all the hygiene stuff during lockdowns, all the hand washing and sanitizing, wouldn't that have done the opposite?
That's a good point. Too much hygiene can mess up the balance in your gut. But maybe those other things, less antibiotics, a more varied diet, maybe that balance it out.
Like a seesaw almost.
It's a delicate system, lots of moving parts. But yeah, we need more research to really understand what's going on.
Yeah. More research is always good. So bringing it back to China, we've talked about the outbreak, weakened immunity, the pandemic's long-term effects. It's a lot. What are the key takeaways for our listeners trying to wrap their heads around all this?
Okay, first thing, stay informed, but don't freak out. Things are changing fast, so good info is key.
Right. Don't get lost in the social media storm.
Yeah, exactly.
But stay tuned to the reliable sources. WHO, those scientific groups, they'll have the most accurate stuff.
Second, this whole thing just shows how connected global health is. What happens over there can affect us over here real quick. We got to work together globally to keep an eye out for these new threats and be ready to act.
Totally. And for each of us, well, it's a reminder to take care of ourselves, right? Basic stuff, washing hands, sleeping enough, good food, all that supports our immune system.
Yeah, and don't forget stress management. Too much stress weakens your defenses, makes you more likely to get sick.
So eat well, sleep well, chill out, and stay informed. Pretty good advice for living in these uncertain times.
I'd say so. And remember, knowledge is power. The more we know about all this, the better choices we can make for our health.
That's a perfect way to lead into our last section, where we're going to dive into, well, the whole information mess surrounding this outbreak.
Right.
How do we separate fact from fiction? So we've talked about a lot, huh? The outbreak, the whole immunity thing, the pandemics, long shadow.
Yeah.
But before we finish up, I want to go back to something that kind of stuck with me. The information side of this whole thing.
Yeah.
It's a mess out there, isn't it? Conflicting reports, social media going crazy, and then, the official silence we talked about. How are we supposed to figure out what's real?
That's the challenge, isn't it? We're drowning in information these days, and it's hard to sift through it all, figure out what's true, what's not. It's like this, some experts call it an infodemic.
Infodemic, huh?
Yeah. Misinformation spreading like a virus itself, basically.
That's a good one. It really fits. But it's not just, spotting fake news, right? It's about being aware of our own biases.
Yeah.
Being critical of where we're getting our info from.
Absolutely.
And being open to changing our minds when new stuff comes up.
That's so important. You need those media literacy skills, that critical thinking. More and more important these days. Got to recognize how information gets twisted, Emotional stuff, cherry-picked data, false choices, all that.
Like those headlines, right?
Yeah.
Designed to make you scared or angry instead of giving you the whole picture.
All the time. And then you've got the echo chambers, especially online. We tend to gravitate towards stuff that confirms what we already think, even if it's, well, maybe not completely accurate.
It's comfy, right?
It is, but it can really warp your view of things.
Yeah, I guess it's human nature to want that. It's easier than dealing with stuff that challenges what we believe.
It is. But that confirmation bias, it just divides us more, makes it harder to actually talk about these complicated issues.
Okay, so how do we escape those echo chambers? Become, smarter about the information we take in? Any tips for our listeners who might be feeling, I don't know, a bit overwhelmed by it all?
First thing, be skeptical. Don't just believe everything you see or hear, question the source, think about why they're saying it, look for proof.
Like a detective almost.
Yeah, exactly. If it sounds too good to be true or just too crazy, it probably is. And another thing, get your info from different places. Don't just stick to one news outlet or one social media feed.
Right.
Look for different viewpoints, different political leanings, different backgrounds, different experts. It'll give you a better overall